Hello friends, it's Cassie. Welcome back for another Miss Ink Stamps video. Today we're going to be using this Queen of Hearts stamp set. I want to make a trifold card and I had this idea in my head, so I thought this stamp set would be super fun. We're going to pair it up with some everyday sentiments because, yeah, I mean, this is a great sentiment set. And then we've got several stencils. This first one is our Jitters stencil. We also have Pick a Card, because it goes perfect with the Queen of Hearts. And then we have this one, which is the masking stencil. It's a two-piece stencil. And so we're going to have a little fun with that. All right, so I've got two card bases, two A2 size card bases, which means I cut them down to 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches and scored them both at 4.25 inches. I told you we're going to make a trifold card, so I need to have basically two backgrounds. So we're going to get started on our first one. I'm going to tack this down. And this is just the front of that card base. I'm going to tack this down to my Tonic platform using the a couple of pieces of mint tape along with some magnets. And then I'm bringing in some Candied Apple Distress Ink. And you're going to see that this blend job is terrible. And honestly, I don't care. I really don't ever go for perfection when I'm doing stuff like this, especially because I do a lot of layering on top of my stencils. It's usually not just one stencil. If I wasn't going to do more to this background, I'd probably be unhappy with this, but I kind of like the I don't want to say discoloration, that's not right, but how it's not an even blend. I kind of like that. I feel like that just gives this background a little bit more character, and I'm cool with that. If you are more of a perfectionist, well, then try to close your eyes during this part, I guess, because I definitely am not. So I'm just going back over it. I kind of like some dark spots here and there. I like a little bit lighter spots in other areas. I just want to make sure that I'm getting color through all of those parts of that wavy masking stencil. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that's all lined up again. And I'm going to bring in the next part. Well, not the next part of this stencil. I'm just bringing in this stencil. This is the Pick a Card stencil. And I'm just going to tack that down right over the top using those magnets, making sure that everything stays in place. And then I'm going to use that same Candied Apple and blend that color over the top, just a lot darker. So I want to make sure that this is nice and saturated through that stencil. And we're going to do that all the way up to the top. And then when I pull that away, you're going to see what I'm talking about. And you're going to see how not having a perfect blend for that first layer really doesn't matter. It just kind of adds to it. You know, like I said, adds a little character. So let's pull that away and see what I'm talking about. How cool is that? All right, so we'll clean up our mess, and then I'm going to bring in the second part of that wavy masking stencil. And if you hear some bells, I do apologize. That's Max checking things out. So same process. We're just going to kind of line this over the top. This is going to leave a little white border along all of those waves. So in between the red and this next color that I choose, there is going to be a little bit of a white line. And I like that. I think that actually looks good. It adds to it. So I'm going to do black soot. And once again, this is not going to be a perfect blend because that's not what I'm going for on this part of the layering. I just want to slap down some of that color. It's going to be dark in some areas, just like before, and lighter in others. Just trying hard not to actually move that stencil. And I'm not super successful, but that's okay too. You're going to see I make mistakes all over this card, but I am not one that likes to start over. I'm just not. I tend to just like to work with what I have. Unless it is just like completely destroyed, I feel like there are ways that we can work with what's going on. So you'll see what I'm talking about. And so we'll finish up this part of the stenciling, and just like before, so I did clean off that Pick a Card stencil. I'm going to put that back on top. I'm going to do my best to try and line that up over the red, you know, kind of looking through, because I want to line it up over the red ones that I did for the first part of the stencil so that everything kind of looks cohesive, like the stencil was not moved and I just did red and black. And then we're going to do the same process. Just go over the top of that, just making sure that those are darker than the background. And this ends up looking so cool. I love that red and black anyway. And then you pair it up with, you know, the Pick a Card and just think of the possibilities with this wavy masking stencil, because you can add any stencil over the top and just kind of make it your own. I think it's so cool. All right, so let's pull that away and see what we're left with. And I love it. All right, so that's the front of this first background. We're going to work on the second background. And you'll see I'm doing it, I guess, backwards, kind of like not how a card would go. But that's part of the trifold. You'll see once I put it together how that all comes together. So we're tacking that down same way we did before. And then I'm just going to bring out a blender, and we're going to use black soot again. and I'm going to blend that all over that background. I want it to be a little smoother than I did before, but it doesn't need to be perfect because once again, I'm going to put another stencil over the top of that. That has just been my MO lately. I love doing that. And you're going to see I make a mistake here. I get a little crazy just with the blending, and I let go, and oop, we blend on the inside of the card. But I'm not going to start over. It's another, I mean, I can cover that. Because it's a trifold, I can cover that. We're just going to work with it. So I'm looking at that going, it's not that big of a deal. It is what it is. All right, and then our background isn't perfect, but again, want to bring in another stencil. So I'm going to bring in some PIXIE spray and spray that on the back, let that dry, take that outside, you know, get yourself a nice ventilated area to put that. And then it isn't sticking great, but that's okay. I don't need this to be perfect either. I'm going to run my brush up and down, not doing circular motions. Try and just run that up and down. It still, like I said, doesn't do perfect. It does move around, and that's okay. I suppose that goes along with the fact that this is the Jitters stencil. Looks like maybe I had a bunch of caffeine before I put this stencil down, but I like it. All right, and then I'm going to put these into my makeshift splatter box, and I'm going to use this palette of paint that I have that is gold and silver. I love it. So I'm going to do the gold on our red and black background. And it's okay if some of that splatters onto the other one. I really don't care. It's not going to be that big of a deal. It's just splatters. And then I'm going to do the silver on that black background. So the all black one, I want that one to be mostly silver. I'll clean off my brush in between, but then I'll show you how pretty that splatter is because it is a shimmery splatter. I love doing stuff like this. And splatter just covers a multitude of mistakes since that seems to be what I do a lot of. So check it out. Oh, a fun splatter. It's gorgeous. All right, so now we're going to do our coloring. I, off camera, went ahead and stamped out my images. Once again, these come from the Queen of Hearts stamp set. I stamped them down onto some Express It cardstock using Memento TUXEDO black ink. Both of those go together really well for alcohol marker coloring. And I am using Copics this go round. And I'm using reds, so you'll notice I'm not going all the way to the edge when I color with my reds. For some reason, the reds in the Copic line tend to bleed a whole lot more than the rest of them. So because I know I'm going to be doing lots of layering with my reds, I didn't go all the way to the edge. And I'm starting with my R14, and I'm just putting down that red where I think the red's going to go, which obviously is going to be on all the hearts. And we're going to do it on the rose. And then we're going to come in and bring in 2 different shades of red so that we have a light, a mid-tone, and a darker one. So I did use R14. This next darker color, surprisingly, is R08. So you have to think about the Copics not necessarily by number order. It's not R8 and R14. That's not how those are. Each of those letters and numbers has a meaning, and it has to do with saturation and things like that. So, yeah, so that's why it's okay for the R14 and the R08, like the R08 to go on top of the R14 because it's definitely darker. And then I'm bringing in the R89, which is definitely a lot more dramatic. And then I work backwards and I put in the R08 and then I do the R14. And then when I do my last layer of that R14, I will go all the way to the edge because at this point now I've done all the blending I want to do on that. So now I can take that all the way to that black line. If I had done it previously, there is a good possibility that I would have had a lot of bleeding through or through to the other side of the line. And I didn't want that. Not any more than I would on my own, I guess. So, so that's all I'll do. And then now we're going to move on to some other colors after we're done with all of our reds. Oh, for the rose, I do finally bring in that R89. I guess I'd forgotten to do it. And then again, we'll blend back. So I'm going to bring in some Y28, and that is a gold color. I'm just putting that all over here. And I'm not going to do a second color on that. And the reason for that is because that gold splatter that I used earlier, I'm actually going to paint right over these lines with that. And you'll see I'm not going to show you all of that, but I'll show you what I'm talking about here. That paint isn't a transparent paint that I'm going to be using. It's opaque. So I do have to be a little bit sparing with that because whatever I color on top of, you're not going to see through. But I'm putting that gold all over. On the bugles, on the banners, all the things. And I love these little bunnies with their collars and so cute. All right, now we'll color our bunnies. We're going to bring in some W3. or C3, I believe that. No, it's W3. And then I'll bring in some W1 and blend that out. And then I decide I want to color her hair black. So I'm going to do a W6. That's going to be my base color for her hair. And then I'll just bring in a W8 and do just a tiny bit of stippling since her hair is curly. So that stippling will give it more of a curly effect. And then bring in that W6 again just to kind of blend that out a tiny, tiny bit. Then we'll move on to her skin tone, which is some E00 along with some E11. And then we can't forget the pink on the bunny's ears. So that is just some RV52. All right, so here's where I'm bringing in that palette, and I'm very lightly coloring the gold over everything that I had already done gold. And just trying to make sure that I don't go over the black lines, because if I do, it will cover those black lines. So I'm just being careful. I have a very skinny brush. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Ooh, isn't that pretty, all that gold? And then I'm going to fussy cut all of these out, and I'm going to take an oval die, and we're going to run it over the top of this background. And then we need to trim off a tiny hair of that piece, and then we need to trim off a tiny hair on the black, just because these are going to overlap, and if you don't, then they'll kind of bow and buckle. Okay, so now we get to put them together. I'm going to use a tape runner, which is always scary because if it doesn't work out, you just rip your paper. This is why I usually like liquid glue, but I'm going to stick this down on the inside. We're covering up that blending mess I made, and then it's a trifold. Check it out. Those go together beautifully. I'm going to stamp out my sentiments, and that one sentiment just cracks me up. Let the heads and fun times roll. It just makes me smile. I love it. So then I pulled out some sentiments from that Everyday Sentiments. We've got Just For You and Birthday Wishes. And I'm going to trim all of these out, and then we can start adhering everything to our card. So I'm going to put our little bunny on there, and he's only going to stick to that bottom portion, partly go over the cutout oval, and then we'll put down Just For You next to him, kind of trying to center that a little bit. Yep. And then we're going to take our little queen, and we will put her inside the oval. So it ends up being like you're going to have a total actually of 3 scenes. So we'll put our queen in there, and then we're going to take our Birthday Wishes and put that in the upper left-hand corner. All with liquid glue. You could use foam tape. That would be kind of fun too, but that adds a lot of dimension. All right, then we'll open it up and we'll put our Let the Heads and Good Times Roll. And Fun Times Roll. There we go. And then we'll take our oval that we cut out. I didn't want to waste that. Let's just put that all the way on the inside of the card. And we'll put our last little bunny just kind of centered up on there. Plenty of room to write to your recipient. And then I'm going to take those last 2 pieces that I cut and colored. We're going to put this piece here, and then her scepter, and then we're going to put the rose down here at the bottom. And then that right there, friends, is going to finish off our trifold card for you today. I hope you love it as much as I do. I had so much fun making it. I want to use this stamp set a bunch because it's just fun. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button and definitely consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And as always, big thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye, everybody.